Okay.
Hello again. This is part two, and we're with Ron Gibson and Kathleen Dudley, and we're talking about the power of the sheriff. Ron, if you could continue in part two.
Well, thank you, Kathleen. But I was just sharing there in part one of the fact that the power of the sheriff is tremendous. And we're not helping our sheriff. We're not giving him true moral support. If he doesn't do things the way each individual wants, then he gets chastised forever. That's not good on our part to help a good public relationship. I want to share another story with you. I hope I'm not boring everybody, but
Great.
Stories tell a lot. We had a sheriff applying to get reelected in a election some years ago, probably been 25 years ago. And it used to be a standing joke. It was Sheriff Daniels was his name. And every morning when I would go to my quarry operation, here's 4 or 5 sheriff's cars parked at the donut shop called the Jelly Donut Shop is what it was called. So we got the standing joke. If you want to get an emergency service, call 911 Donut. And this went on throughout the county. And anyway, to get down to my point, he's got them to put a levy up for vote for a tax increase to the property owner for the purpose of funding the sheriff office with more money. So I stopped in. I see all these sheriff cars there, and I'm sitting toward the front of the building, and all the sheriffs are in the back there. Excuse me.
Bless you.
And Sheriff Daniels walked by, and I went to him in high school. He was a year behind me. Pardon me, in high school. And he just got to my shoulder, and I said, Sheriff Daniels, I said, I'd like to talk to you for a minute. And he turned around and he said, what's that? And he's always had his nose up in the air. If it rained, he drowned. But anyway, just one of those guys. And I said, I want to talk to you about the levy. I said, I think you're going about it all wrong. And all the deputies got as close to me as they could, and they stuffed their thumbs in their belt, and they put their elbows out. How dare you talk to the sheriff like this? Boy, you better be careful. We'll throw you in jail. I mean, that was the presentment. And he said, well, what are you talking about? I said, you don't have a dollar problem. And the sheriffs, boy, they swell up like a poison pup. Some more. And he said, well, what do you mean? I said, you have enough money in the sheriff's budget. I said, but it's improperly used. But that's not your main problem. Your main problem, Sheriff Daniels, is that you have a public relations problem. And boy, those deputies, they wanted to jump on me like choking a snake. I mean, you could see they just bitter looking. And he said, well, I don't know what you mean. I said, let me tell you what we the people see in the county. Instead of you addressing drug problems and thieving, stealing of property or damage to property, we drive down the highway and you go past an overpass, and right behind that overpass is a hidden county deputy looking for somebody to write a ticket. Your whole focus is on tickets rather than addressing crime. And I said, I can tell you, as sure as I'm sitting here and you and your deputies are standing there, this levy will not pass. I said, I guarantee it. If it does, I'm going to buy you a steak dinner. So anyway, he said, well, we'll see. That levy went down 80 to 20. 80% of the people for the same reason. We're not going to support you when you're out there picking our pocket and arresting us for going 15 miles over the speed limit. So I'm just giving you the other side of what the abuse of the sheriff's office. If they have a servant's heart, they're not anxious to give a ticket. They're trying to quiet any problem. I remember as a young boy, high school age, going to a prom. a graduation prom thing. I had a girlfriend in another town. So I drove through this little mining town called Jacksonville, and I was speeding about 5-6 miles an hour. And it wasn't the sheriff, but it was the city police chief. And his name was Frank Carter. And he spun out after me, and I wasn't going like a wild man going to an outhouse. I would just drive along. And he pulled me over. He walked up and put his hands on his hip, and he said, "Young man," he said, "why are we in such a hurry?" So I told him, I said, "I'm late for a prom, and my girlfriend's waiting for me to pick her up, and I had a suit on and all that stuff." And he said, "Let me tell you something, young man." He said, "I want to wish you the best and a wonderful evening." But he said, "Slow down for me, would you?" I said, "Yes, sir." And he just smiled at me, got in his car, and went around me, and I went on to the party that night. But see, that's building public relation. And I respected that man far more from that day on. He could have wrote me a ticket, and Jacksonville needs the money. But that wasn't his motive or his for doing what he did. He knew how to deal with people. I used to work for one of the largest contractors in the world, one of the 5 top contractors in the world. And this guy in 1970, 71 did $2.2 to $2.5 billion a year. Back then, that is probably close to $1 trillion today. And I became a superintendent for him on his construction crew, and I became an estimator and a superintendent. We bid a short job, 2.5 mile, but had a horrendous amount of dirt because we had to realign a highway and big old high hills. So he came out on a Saturday, and I'm doing all of the research on this and measuring and whatever. But anyway, he got out of his car and he walked up there on the bank where I was standing looking at the plans. And he said, "Well, Ron," he said, "how are you bidding this job?" So we went item by item, and he'd challenge you. He'd say, "Why'd you bid it that way?" and almost act like he's mad. But it's his bond. I mean, he's got to put up millions of dollars a bond. He wanted to be sure that I knew what I was talking about. And when we got all done, he walked up to my side, put his arm around my shoulder, and he said, "Now, Ron," he said, "let me tell you something." He said, "You can hire a man," and he said, "not pay him very much, but appreciate him. You don't have much of a people problem." But he said, "You can appreciate a person a lot and not pay him very much, and you don't have a people problem." But he said, when you don't pay them and you don't respect them, and give them their due diligence, he said, now you got a people problem. He said, never position yourself to where you have a people problem, because he said that's the hardest thing to fix. Financial, we can fix. People problem is much more difficult. And that was the point I was trying to get across to that sheriff. You got a public relations problem here. So I'm just sharing with you some of the things that are really important. And I'll tell you a little story too. About 4 months ago, 5 months ago, maybe 6 months ago, I put out an invitation to all of the sheriffs in Southern Oregon to come, and I would give a law class on the power of the sheriff. Okay? Not one took me up on the invitation.
So Ron, what does that mean? I mean, that's an obvious question, but if we don't have sheriffs who are going to focus in terms of constitutional sheriffs, then how do we, the people, how do we go forward? Maybe you could give some.
What you need to do in those situations, and we're doing that now with our sheriff in the next county, Sheriff Sickler, and he's listening. But you got to feed him a little bit of the time, because a group that I know, I'm not affiliated with them directly, but they rely a lot on me for law facts and that kind of stuff. And but he's listening. But you got to give a little bit of a time and let him chew on it. And if you find that I'm wrong, let me know. But a group of you people need to confront the sheriff and say, Sheriff, we're here to support you 100%. But there's a condition, is the fact that you function as a constitutional sheriff, because that's the basis of which we elected you, to protect our rights and our property and to address criminal activity or whatever the case may be. And if that's not being done, you need to bring his attention to his attention. Then he knows that you're watching what he's doing. Because if you don't, and then you follow up, make personal contributions to the sheriff department with money. The old saying, money talks. And it's not a bribe, but it's to let him know, because every sheriff's office that I'm aware of, at least in this state, is deficient of funds. But it shows a good faith effort to let him know you support him. But it's a barter system. You're saying, we want you to do what's right, not do the status quo. A sheriff has the authority, in the jurisdiction to arrest that judge. If he issues a decree that violates your constitutional rights, he took a constitutional oath and he swore to uphold it in his oath of office, he can have that judge that issued that court order arrested. Are you with me here?
Well, I am, but have you ever seen that happen? Have you ever actually seen
I've seen it happen one time.
All right.
And one time only. So I'm saying it has been done. It's not frequent because everybody's scared of the court system. Other than when you're seasoned like you and I are about the court, well, most people are scared to death. They get tongue-tied. They get so nervous. They don't know how to defend themselves. And people ask me, Ron, what do I need to say in court? Tell me. Send me a cheat sheet or whatever the case is. And all I'm saying in that, pardon me, is the very fact, excuse me, just getting over pneumonia. So I apologize for coughing this stuff up. But you have to get involved, folks. If you have no right to complain, if you're sitting on your butt at home or at work and you don't go and participate in your elected officials, and let them know respectfully, I'm watching you. Not because I'm in criticism of you, but to let you know I'm here in support, but I want you to do the right thing, and that's your fiduciary duty. Don't tell me that you're doing this wrong and that's your job, because it isn't your job. You have a framework to work within as all elected and hired officials that are supposed to be public servants, but they don't. They're always pushing the limit or just run right over the boundary. And it's up to you and I as a civic duty, a moral duty, and a lawful duty to make our public officials account for what they're doing. But we get short-memoried. Oh, I didn't remember that, or oh, he promised this last election. Man, oh man, we deserve what we get. And that's what the Bible says. God said, you will not be mocked. You will reap what you sow. And we're sowing a seed of neglect and tacit agreement. Tacit agreement, you're in agreement by your silence. And we better stop that, folks. We had better get off our butt and get involved and set all of this other stuff that you think's a priority, because Thomas Jefferson said it best. When you sacrifice liberty for security, soon you will have neither. And we're on that road to destruction and death this very moment. So, take it for what it's worth. But you will change your county if you'll do that. And anybody that wants me to come and do a class, I'll be glad to do it. I charge to do it because I have to cover my own expenses and my own travel, my own meals, whatever. But I do seminars, law seminars, I do patent seminars, I do all kinds of that stuff. And I'm not here to beat on people that have to do this. But I'm telling you, if you need guidance in it, I'm here. So, Kathleen, thank you for all that you do.
Well, you're welcome. Ron, can you give us your email address?
Yes, it's D as in David, R as in Romeo, I as in ice, T as in Thomas, E as in echo, C as in Charlie, R as in Romeo, G as in golf, at hotmail.com. That's DRITECRG at hotmail.com.
Okay, very good. And you're affiliated with a website where people can also reach you. Can you give me that as well?
Yes, it's rongibson.info.
Okay. And do you want to give out your phone number or maybe not on the
I
YouTube?
don't want it's
Okay.
it's all over half the world already.
All right. What is your number, Ron?
541-621-5548.
Very good. Well, Ron, is there anything else that you'd like to talk about, just in summary on this? I mean, I know we have our own responsibility to understand who these elected officials are in terms of what their jobs are, what their power is. That's number one, our responsibility. And then
Correct.
we have the responsibility to find someone who will fit that job. And what my experience is that on the local level, we can have tremendous impact because these folks are our peers. And so we used to, back when this country was first founded, have associations where there wasn't government control. We had associations for cattlemen, we had associations for timber, we had associations for dairy, we had associations for everything, and families were often involved in 5 or 6 or 7 different associations, but that we were involved. Today, we have been taught to become very lazy and complacent. And so how is there anything other than lighting this fire from your presentations? Is there anything else to create some more motivation for people? I mean, how do you respond to that mouthful?
Well, that's a very, very good question. But it boils down to this, Kathleen, unfortunately. The individual, God gave us free choice, a free and sovereign will, the Bible says. Each individual has to decide what they're going to do. I can present information, you can present information, whatever. But it's like the issue of the patents that I help people do. The patent benefit that is initiated through that miraculous document of the true title to your land, for you to bring that forward now, some maybe 100 years after the fact or whatever, you have to do a certificate of acceptance. See, most people in the past have been doing called the Declaration of Land Patent. That's unlawful as it can get. You can go to jail for that. That means that you're creating a new patent. We don't have the authority to do that. It's unlawful. We have to accept and bring forward the existing patent. And my point of saying this is the very purpose of that the people have to accept the information. They have to want the information. And if there is no desire, the Bible says for one to learn, one must be willing to be taught. Now that's a personal choice, isn't it? Yeah. See? And so what I'm saying, in answer to your question, there's another half to the equation to make this work. You have to have a provider and you have to have a recipient. It doesn't matter with food. You got a supplier for food. Somebody needs to eat the food. And somebody produces the gas. Somebody uses the gas. I mean, you go right on down the line. Information is much the same thing. And But I'll tell you, establishing a personal rapport with the sheriff and their deputies is absolutely critical. If you don't do that, you'll never fully reach them. Now, I want to get back to something you said a little earlier about how we elected. Here's another problem. We don't interview candidates. We come and let them tell us what their qualifications are, for the most part. And you got to ask the cold, hard questions. What are you going to do if the day after you're elected, the court order says to come and throw me out of my home, me and my family? Ask him that question, because it's within his jurisdiction. The other thing, I'm going to go back to it, not that I'm trying to promote the patent issue, but so that people know. When you bring forward your true title of your land, you cannot be evicted on that, even if they rule against you on the foreclosure, because the law states that it has to be compared with who has superior title. The only title to land there is a land patent. Your warranty deed is not a title. It's a permission slip. It's sick.
Well, it is. When I first heard that from you, I got kind of weak-kneed, you know. I was like, wow. And how many of us have been pulled into that one? Oh, wow. It's quite a jumble of shenanigans, excuse me, that have gone on. And yet we have our constitutionally secured rights, the Bill of Rights within the Constitution that we can assert. And knowing that and asserting those gives us jurisdiction over our own God's rights, common law, our sovereignty, our birthrights. And as long as we stand in that empowered stance, then we can actually make inroads. And I'm assuming that you are going to support me 100% on that, Ron.
Absolutely. One of the things that I'd like to respond to that, Kathleen, that most people do not know, and that is, well, two things really. Number one, when you go into an administrative tribunal, it's not a court. The courts are literally a bank. Understand, folks, you got to turn your mind thing and get the garbage you've been fed, let it go out the back end, like where most things supposed to go that you want to discharge. Okay? A little Ron's left-handed humor, if you please. But the point I'm trying to make is the very fact that by allowing yourself in your decisions not to make our elected officials accountable, then like I said earlier, now you have sown the seed of despair and failure, kind of like Albert Einstein said. We better stop doing the things that we're doing that are not working. The other thing of it is anybody that is to be elected by the people, we need to do interviews. You ask how to address that. And you need to get with them either privately or with a group of people, and preferably with a group that shows that just more than you are interested in his answer and his approach. And you got to ask the cold hard, it's an interview. And boy, you want to get right to the bottom of the barrel. Because if you don't, I better not ask that, or, I'm afraid what he'll say, or he won't like me anymore, or he won't show up when I call him for an emergency. All of this dumb reasons that we come up of why we don't do what we should be doing. And we are reaping the harvest of what we sown. So, but it takes the public and the elected or hired people to work together. That's what makes successful communities, and what creates security is that everybody has to do their part. It's like you take an engine. You take the pistons out of an engine, it won't run. You put the wrong camshaft in it, it won't run. You mess with the distributor, it won't run. You don't put proper fuel in it, it doesn't run. That principle applies to your community and your civic surroundings. So the question is, what are we going to do to improve it? And that's a personal choice, folks. God gave us that right of choice. We have a responsibility to take that choice and put it to constructive use and constructive application. So I kind of think that's my answer to your question.
Yes, well, I thank you for that. Well, Ron, I will see you again in a future interview, and I thank you and wish you blessings for a lovely day.
Thank you much, Kathleen. And for all you viewers out there, just God bless you. But take things to heart, folks, because it's your rights and your property that is on the chopping block. And I've been screaming, so to speak, from the rooftop for the last 35 or 40 years, you better do something to protect your rights and your property or you're going to lose it, because they're coming after it. Make no mistake, it's not if, it's when. And I'm seeing it escalated everywhere. My phone, you heard it, it rings and rings and rings. People run, help me, what do I do? And they usually wait till the last minute. That's a terrible thing to do. People call me, Ron, help me, I got to save my place. I said, what's going on? Said, well, they're going to foreclose on my property Thursday. Here it's Wednesday or Monday. I get that all the time. And I kind of want to reach through there and bang them on the forehead. Hey, how come you didn't get a hold of me 2 months ago when this thing came up? Because they let the time expire and now they're fighting the clock. And very, very, very damaging. So, folks, you have the power. That's why in our Constitution it says, we the people. And what we the people means, and I'm going to share this with you, and I pray to God that you hear what I'm saying. The Commonwealth of Delaware, when they received the original writing, and they were the first ones to sign it and to get on board, they said, wait a minute, there's something missing. They introduced we the people. And by doing so, they made you and I, every American, king of our land. That's the same thing the patent does. It's the only true title. Government is severed from any further intervention into that. Use that power that God gave you and I. He gave us dominion over the entire earth. And the fowl of the air, the Bible says, and the fish of the sea. And we're sitting here like we're some slave because we have allowed ourselves to become a slave. I wrote a book on that having to do with taxes. You're not a slave. Do you want to continue to be a slave? Because if that's your will, you're going to be one. Trust me, you're going to be one. Anyway, Lord bless you all. Thank you for the opportunity to share. And next time I'll try to confuse you further.
Thank you, Ron. You have a lovely day.
Thanks, Kathleen.